So I'd like to talk about section 2.4. There's two parts to it. The first has to do with how do I output things in a pretty formatted fashion. The second is about text input, which I'll just briefly talk about. There will not be any classwork or homework dealing with text input until later. But so basically, why do I want formatted output? My motivation would be something like this. Let's say I have this very simple, silly gradebook outputter program here, and I want to output like a heading and then like the different student names, their test scores, and some kind of comment. And I try to make some kind of effort here using like a tab to kind of tab everything over in the same fashion. But when I run it, it looks like that. So it's kind of all over the place, and the decimals are, right, this score 87 of 93. Oh, by the way, just a little side note here. When you just do 87 divided by 93, Java treats them like integers. So integer divided by integer, it always treats it as an integer, even if you're storing it in a double. Notice how this became 0.00. So since they're ints, it'll be 0, 0 unless you do something called typecasting. We explicitly say, no, force this to be a double. You do that with like a little parenthesis there. And so anyway, that's that. So we get this number like 93 point whatever on that test. But they're all smushed together, and these are all off because this person's name is longer. And so we want a way to format this into nice, neat columns. And so the syntax is a little bit confusing. It's borrowed from other languages, but let's go over the basics, and then we will make this prettier using our format string, and then you guys can try one and submit that as your classwork for the day. So we use something called, instead of saying print line, we say printf, which stands for print formatted, which is from C, C++. And the first parameter, so it's basically you're going to type in something like system.out.printf, and then the first string is called your format string. So it's basically going to be a string, and it can take a bunch of different parameters. They can have one extra parameter, you can have two, you can have three, and basically each one of these guys is going to be marked with some kind of format specifier. Okay, so for example, I might put %s, and then %d, and then %f. And so each one of these has a special meaning, and it indicates what you're plugging in here. So s would be a string. It's in order, so this first one matches up with this parameter. It means this string is going to be formatted in this way. And then this is going to be a D, which stands for decimal number, which means a float or a double. And then F, F stands for, F stands for, D stands for decimal. Excuse me, I made a mistake there. D stands for decimal, so a integer, an int. And F stands for floating point number, so like a double or a float. So you can have, you don't have to have three, you can have just one, in which case you'd only specify one of these. But again, notice the pattern. There's a string, and then each parameter after that specifies what type of thing you're plugging in. So, again, the letters are, to go to the second page here, D stands for a decimal integer, so that would be your ints. D stands for decimal, that's kind of confusing, but it's an int, basically. F stands for floating point, so a float or a double, anything with decimals in it. C would be you're going to plug a char in. S, you're going to plug a string in. And that's really all you need. So again, here's some more examples. You can see, again, the format string. Oops, excuse me. The format string, in this case, has only one thing here. It's kind of hard to read. And then this variable you're going to plug in right here. Here's another one where there's one variable you're plugging in. Here you're plugging in one variable. Here you're plugging in one variable. And so it's confusing without examples. So let's take a look. Notice that this is the thing you want to look at. You're going to put a % sign to mark each place where you're going to plug in that special formatted variable. % sign marks the start of it, and then there's optional flags, and then you put the width. In other words, what do you want the minimum size to be? Then if it's a decimal, you put dot something, and that's how many decimals you want it to round to. And then finally you put either S for string, D for decimal, F for floating point. Optionally, these flags are here. So if you put a dash, right after the percent sign, it's going to left justify, put everything to the left. A plus, we'll put a plus or a minus. A 0 here will output 0, put a bunch of zeros in front of everything, or to the right of it. Comma, if you put a comma there, it'll make the numbers all nice and pretty. And the space will display a minus sign if the number is negative, or a space if it is positive. Okay, so again, that's probably still confusing. Let's look at a couple examples here, and then we'll do a couple examples. So again, every format specifier starts with a percent sign, ends with a letter with some extra flags possibly in between. So for example, if I said %d means you're going to plug in a decimal number. Again, that's like an int. The 12 means it's going to be at least length 12. This is the minimum, so you're giving it at least 12 characters. Since you didn't put any other flags there, it's by default right justified. Okay. If you say %1d, that means just, again, a decimal with a minimum length 1. Since it's going to be length 1, you could just put %d if you want. S means string again. So something like this, if you see F again means floating point number, so a decimal. The 1 again means that you'd see at least one character printed out. The 0.2 means you are rounding to 2 decimal places, right? 2 decimal places. So if here, the difference here would be, okay, instead of a minimum of 1 character, I'm going to print out a minimum of 12 characters. So it's going to be a lot of space there. I'm going to round it to 3 decimal places. Again, there's no dash. The dash means to left justify, so this is still right justified. E is the exponential form. We're not going to use that. G, we're not going to use that either. So again, our flags, space would put a minus if it's negative. Comma is going to make it with commas formatted. Minus is going to left justify it. Plus is going to output a plus or a minus. And 0 puts a 0 pad. And again, everything starts with the percent sign. All right, so again, yeah, let's practice some examples here. So let's go to the format tester demo. Let's go to the format tester demo. Again, this is not nice. So basically what we want to do is let's space out each one of these. Her name is quite long, so let's make this a minimum of 25 characters for this first column. Okay. Notice I want the first column to be a string. I want the second column, well, this guy's going to be a string also, but I want the second column to be a double here, right? And the third column is going to be another double, and the fourth column is going to be a string. So let's take a look at how we would do that. Okay, so I'm going to take this now, and again, what you have to do is you have to start with a format string, okay? It's always a format string, so we're going to say printf. Let's say printf. So let's change this from print line. I'm going to delete this little tester thing. Print line to printf. Okay. Second, I'm going to break this up into, instead of one string, I'm going to make this 4 different things I'm going to plug in. Okay. So student, comma. So literally test1, the literal string test1, comma. 4 parameters here. Test2 and comment. Right, these are my parameters. So again, the first thing though is going to be the format string. Okay, so the format string comes first. So let me just put a little string here with a comma. Okay, and so you have to look and say, okay, I'm plugging in 4 things. In this case, it's just 4 different strings. And so I remember when I'm plugging in a string, I just mark it with an S. Okay, and everything starts with the percent sign. So I start with just saying, okay, %s, space %s, %s, %s. Basically saying, plug this string in here, plug this string in here, plug this string in here, plug this string in here. Okay, in that order. Boom, 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 boom. Okay. And so if we run it, I guess it looks okay, but a few things that are wrong. We want it to be spread out because we want enough space for the Sally Johnson Jackson. So we need to put a minimum amount of characters. And so our minimum amount of characters, let's say, again, we need a lot of space here. Let's say 25 because her name is long. Okay, you put that before the letter. Okay, we can put 25. Now the numbers, I don't need as much space, so let's just say 15, 15, and 15. 25, sure. Okay, and so that's going to put If I run this, notice that, okay, I've got lots of space here now. For her name, lots of space here, 15 characters, 15 characters, 15 characters. Now, notice how it's right justified. You have a bunch of blank space here. So I want to left justify this because this is kind of awkward looking. Remember our flags, to left justify something, you put a dash in front. Put a dash in front. If I put a 0 in front, you can test it. If you put a 0 in front, so that's after the percent sign, put a 0 in front, it would mark everything, oops, excuse me. It would mark everything with zeros. I guess that would only work with, yeah, I guess the numerical values, so I can't do it with strings. So if I do a dash, that's going to left justify this guy, and in fact all of them. So let's put a dash for all of them to left justify. Okay, now notice how this guy is over here to the left, over to the left, so on and so forth. Now these guys are not lined up. Bobby is still on the same line, so a couple things you could do. You could just do at the very end, a \n, which does a new line, \n, or you could insert a blank system.out.println with nothing in between. Okay, so that would put Bobby Smith on the next line, but Bobby Smith is still not formatted. So we're going to do the same thing. Okay, we're going to change the first parameter, again, is a format string. Okay, %sign. Then the second parameter is going to be the first thing you're going to plug in, which is the string Bobby Smith. Okay, let me delete all the different spaces. Put a comma here instead. So the second parameter is test1, this is the first test score. Third parameter is test2. And the fourth parameter is the string about doing poorly recently. Okay, so we need to make our format string have 4 different parameters. 1, 2, 3, 4. So the first one is a string. Again, S is for string. And again, it's easy to mix these up. D stands for decimal, as in just an integer, a decimal integer. F stands for floating point number, anything with decimals. So D, F, it's easy to mix those up. Okay, so the first one is again %S. That's for string. The second one is a decimal, F for floating point number, excuse me, F for floating point number, F for floating point number, and again, the last one is a string. So again, this one plugs in here, this one plugs in there, this one plugs in there, that one plugs in there. Okay, now it's not even letting me run this because again, it's easy to forget. It's not print line, it's print F for formatting. Okay, so if I run it, okay, it looks kind of a little bit better. Oops, I forgot, I need another new line here before Sally Johnson. Okay, so we can take a look. Okay, now, we forgot to insert the number of spaces. So again, we need 25 for the first space, 15, 15, and 25. And again, oops, I forgot, if I don't do the dash, that's going to right justify everything. So I want to put everything on the left-hand side, so I'm going to dash it. Okay, and now it's nice and lined up. So I'm going to just copy this form. Oops, I guess I don't need this blank space here. So I delete this. I'm just going to copy this format string here, paste it in. Okay, and I have to do a little bit of work here. It's just to print F for format string. Delete all the extra space padding that we don't need anymore. Put commas in. Commas in. Okay, so again, this string gets plugged in here. This test3 gets plugged into the F, the floating point. This test4 goes into the F, and this string goes in here. Okay, so if I run this now, okay, now it looks nice and lined up. Last thing is for decimal, floating point numbers, anything with, the decimals, floating point numbers, you can get a nice rounded number too. So let's say I want to round this to this hundredths place, 2 decimal places. We can say 15.2, 15.2, and that would round it. So it's still 15 characters rounded to 2 decimal places. So there we go, right there. Right? You could do 15.3 or 15.3, 4, whatever you want. It would round to that many decimal places. Okay, there you go. Everything is nice and lined up. Okay, so now your classwork, I'd like you to go to the Format Tester classwork file, and it's some practice for you to get the hang of this. So we've got a main method, and we got an int and a double. So I first start by printing out the int, printing out the double. Actually, this doesn't even work yet. So basically, there's a bunch of tests. So I've got the print line already in there for you. I've got the printf for the format string. So again, you need to have a format string, comma, and then the thing you are plugging in. So for this first one, it's an int test. You're going to plug in this int right here. So you're going to say test int, right? And how are you going to format it? So remember, mark your format with a %, and then you just really have to consult. Okay, what do I put? Is it going to be S? Is it going to be D? Is it going to be F? Do I put a number here? Do I put a dash number here? Dash dot 2? And what's it going to be? And you always have to end with the letter, D or S. So some of those don't make sense, but that's the general format. Try to print it with 5 blank spaces in the front. So in other words, 5 here. Then you got this number. So think about how many total do you need? Is it right or left justified? Looks like it's right. Okay. This time have it where the spaces are printed over here. You can use the flag. Consult your notes. Right. Here's your characters, and here are your flags. Okay. So just consult your notes. This time have 3 blank spaces in the front. There's a comma there as well. Have commas separating them, so look for that flag. Double test. So print 2 $ in the front, and then have rounded to decimal places. So I'll give you a hint. Again, you have your format string, and then you have the thing you're plugging in here, which is going to be not the test int, but the test double. Right, you're going to plug in the test double here. Okay. This is a format string, but it doesn't start plugging in until you actually write the %sign. So you don't have to start with the %sign. So I can start with hey, and then I do a %, whatever, and it would plug it in right here. So instead of starting with hey, you could start with 2 $signs, and that's just part of the string, and then it'll plug in based on whatever you do with this. I plug it in right here. 3 decimal places with a minimum of 15 characters printed, and then pad it with zeros. Think about how you do that. And then finally, this time testing, plugging in 2 different things. So output the 2 numbers in the middle of the string, put 2 blank spaces in front of the decimal number, round the double to 2 digits. I make, there's your 2 blank spaces with the $sign, this much money, selling laptops, new line. Okay, again, the new line, you can use a \n. Actually, %n will also work, but \n is just fine for new lines. Just put the \n right after the laptops. And then call it a day, and you can make $98765. All right, so try that on your own. Take 15 minutes. You can work with a partner. You can turn the same thing. I will post the solutions, but don't just copy that. Try on your own, because you will use this either on your programming assignment or on the upcoming test, or maybe both. All right, so go ahead and finish this format tester classwork and turn it into Google Classroom.